India's ultra super rich have gotten richer and the poor have gotten poorer. The inequality gap is only rising. International NGO Oxfam is out with its Inequality Report 2019, which has highlighted some shocking statistics. 1% of India's ultra-rich hold more than half of the national wealth. In fact, the total wealth of 9 richest Indians is equal to the wealth of the bottom 50%. That's not all. While globally, billionaires' fortunes increased by 12%, India's billionaires saw their fortunes rise by a whopping 39%. Oxfam says if India's richest 1% pay just a little bit more tax, the government's health budget could go up by as much as 50%. We also ask citizens if the nation's super rich should be taxed more.
अमीर लोगों को तो ज़्यादा टैक्स लगना ही चाहिए क्योंकि उनका इनकम भी वैसा रहता है।
उन लोगों के पास पैसा है और उन लोगों के पास मतलब ऐसा कुछ है कि मतलब उन लोग दे सकते हैं।
One class, the middle class, which is paying taxes. Correct? The poor escape and the super rich pay what they want to pay.
Once an ultra rich person who owns a company or a business, as such, if they are taxed more, they will eventually, it will affect on an employee's salary.
सबों का लेवल सेम ही होना चाहिए ना, जो भी है।
Mirror now asks, should the government step in to bridge the increasing gap between the rich and poor in India? Will a rich tax bridge this gap? Should India tax the ultra-rich? Let's debate.
Well, the numbers according to this report, and this is a report for those before you start arguing that this is probably not a very reliable source of information. Every year before the World Economic Forum begins in Davos, a report is released by Oxfam on global income inequality, the difference or the gap between the rich and the poor. And we're looking specifically at the portion of the report that points at India. And some of these numbers are heartbreaking. Take a look at what the numbers say. The numbers actually say that there are 9 individuals in India, 9 people who have more money than the bottom half of our population. The bottom half of our population is about 600 crore people. There are 9 individuals who have more money than 600 crore people in our country put together. It also says that the top 10% of our population holds 77.4% of the national wealth in the country. In contrast, the top 1% of the population, 1%, has 51.53% of the national wealth. 60% of the bottom of the population altogether has about 4.8% of the wealth. The gap is shocking and it's getting wider and wider. Now, this is not, before I introduce my guest, this is not a blame game. I'm not interested to know who's responsible. And we're not pinning this on any particular government because in order to get numbers so bad, you have to have worked at this for many, many decades. This is the doing of several governments and several weak policies. My question is fairly simple. Should this income inequality be our top priority in our country? Because the report also points out that we have children in this country who are thrice as likely to die from poverty before they reach their first birthday than yours and my children. We have women in this country who have no access to health care and are far more likely to give birth to stillborn babies or die during childbirth than those who have in this country. The have-nots don't have access right now to education, to water, to healthcare, to sanitation. And that's killing them. How can we solve this problem? The report also gives a suggestion to the government of India, saying very clearly, if you were to tax your super ultra rich, those top 9 people or 10 people, maybe even 12 people, an extra 0.5% more, you would be able to increase your budget on healthcare by 50%. That's how wide that gap is. Can we as a country honestly look at bridging that gap and making sure the poorest in our country are given food, water, healthcare and education? Joining me on the show, Vineet Goenka, member of the BJP, R. Gopalan, former finance secretary. Ranu Balgol is the Director of Policy Research and Campaigns for Oxfam India. Manisha Priyam is a policy analyst and an economist. And Professor Arun Kumar is the Chair Professor for the Indian Institute of Social Sciences. I thank you for joining us. I want to start with Professor Kumar. Professor Arun Kumar, thank you for joining us. Did you find the numbers shocking, the ones that were introduced today? Because a lot of the people I spoke to on Twitter turned around and said, this is capitalism, this is the global average, we should be okay with this. Should we be okay with this? Is it part of capitalism?
I can't hear. Numbers are always shocking. When you see this kind of inequality between the rich and the poor, then you have to worry. But, let me also add that the inequality as shown by the Oxfam report is only part of the inequality. There is a much greater inequality because the black income is not counted, real estate is not really counted in this thing, and the data on wealth is actually only partial. The data on wealth, does not incorporate certain kinds of wealth that exist with the rich. So the inequality is much greater, and that's why it's, a problem. Second thing I'd like to point out is that, the unorganized sector has been particularly hit hard in the recent past because of the demonetization in the GST. And therefore, the inequality has increased rapidly in the last 2 years. And that is something that we need to take into account. The third thing I want to point out is that there are long-term factors. Our policies for the last 70 years has been top-down policies, where the interest of the common person and the poor has not been our top priority. We have tried to say that let the urban areas develop and then the rural areas will follow. Now that is why the rural areas, the agriculture have been marginalized. The fourth factor that is very important in this context is our fiscal policies. Our fiscal policies have depended more on indirect taxes and less on direct taxes. Indirect taxes hurt the interest of the poor. If you have more of direct taxes, then you can take care of inequality to a much greater extent. But what we have done is we've eliminated wealth tax, we've eliminated, estate duty and gift taxes. These are the kind of things that would actually reduce inequality over a period of time. Fourth factor is that the investment in the economy is in the organized sector and very little in the unorganized sector. So employment generation in the unorganized sector is a residual. Yes. And therefore, very low-paying jobs get created in the unorganized sector, whereas in the organized sector, with technology, you have a better chance of creating jobs. Finally, I would say technology has been a great disruptor in the recent past. What technology has done is displaced large number of people, and they have moved into the unorganized sector. So in other words, there are multiple factors that underlie the fact that the inequality is growing. And this inequality is growing globally, as your report points out. It's not just here in India, yes, but globally the same factors apply. And therefore, in a sense, what we have is global factors affecting our policies. Whereas what we need are internal policies which would take care of our inequality. And as your report points out, education, health, social services, yes, these are very important if we are to take care of poverty.
Well, I want to bring in Ranu Balgol, who joins us right now from Oxfam. Ranu, many thanks for joining us. From your point of view, and the report that has come out from Oxfam made it to the front pages of most of the newspapers as well. It does point out that while India's GDP and has grown between 7 and say 8%, the richest in our country have managed to increase their wealth by nearly 40% in the last 1 year. Compared to the global average, is that a worrying number?
Of course it is. I mean, a lot of people I talk to, they'll say, well, poverty has reduced and inequality is not so bad. After all, people are earning a living. But the fact is that this glaring gap that is increasing between rich and poor, and the fact that, where you are born, in which family, what part of this country determines the trajectory your life will take is worrying. I mean, you yourself said in your summary of the report that, a large number of children die before the age of 1 year in this country. Education facilities are also determined. I mean, you look at the government's own data. If you look at the provisioning of the funding that is available for even implementing Right to Education Act, which is an act passed by the Parliament, There is huge scarcity of resources to meet the minimum requirements. You look at the health sector, the primary health sector is in shambles. We can't forget the Gorakhpur tragedy, where so many infants died due to lack of oxygen. We can't forget Dana Majhi in Odisha, who did not have money to pay for ambulance. So there's something seriously wrong with our system where services are not reaching the poor. And that kind of determines their future and
Yes.
continues to kind of widen the gap between the rich and the poor.
Mr. R. Gopalan, former Finance Secretary, Government of India. Mr. Gopalan, I'm very grateful for your time. I want you to help our audience understand, does the gap widen again because of pure capitalism, or does the gap widen because of the lack of policy? How does this happen, and how can we solve for this problem?
Okay, I mean, I would like to acknowledge Professor Kumar's initial comments, which
Yes,
deals with all facets of what really happened in the past. And in that sense, his point that the inequality which is being shown is not really the inequality, it is much more than that, because so many other things are not taken into consideration while deriving this income and wealth. But despite all that, I would also like to say that if you look at the inequality, India is definitely better off than comparable countries. Then you can imagine how the inequality is going to be in those countries like Brazil, like Thailand and Turkey and China. You can look at that. The second important aspect is that in India itself there is a inequality across states and across locations, across religion, across minorities and caste. The inequality is very much there. So that is what is called your horizontal inequality, which we see in the state, and that has been acknowledged by many economic survey reports. I'm just flagging the problem as just to elaborate on what Professor Kumar has indicated.
Yes.
But the problem is that what did we do in the last so many decades to ensure that this inequality did not, develop? Well, what trickle-down theory is good for the purpose of creating wealth, but did we ensure that those who are affected because of lack of access to education, health and those kind of things, did we take care of them? Did we give them an opportunity to really grow as they should have if they had all these opportunities as the rich people had? So the question is creating infrastructure for them, getting access for them to this infrastructure, and these two are very, very important. Thirdly, there is this report, Oxfam report, also talks about what they call the tech-based wealth and the rent tech sectors. It talks about that. Now that is as a result of the policies of the government, which should have got changed and which should ensure that there is transparency in all governmental action, and resource allocation is done in a transparent manner so that there is no advantage taken by people as they go along. Well, if you ask me whether MRTP kind of things would help, I don't think so, because that stifles competition in a very, very big way. And the policies must be favoring everyone, universal access, transparency, and ensure that infrastructure is created in health, education, skill development, and make ease of doing business very, very good.
Yes.
And all these things will, some sense, will ensure that inequality is taken off over a period of time.
Mr. Vinit Goenka,
it's a big job. It's not a small job. It's a very, very big job.
Yes. Mr. Vinit Goenka, is it a priority for the government right now to bridge this gap of inequality of income among the poor and the very rich? Because if we look at the numbers of Oxfam, the very rich, the richest people in our country have increased their wealth by nearly 40%, 39% in 1 year, whereas everybody else, the poorest people in the country, have increased their wealth in single digits by 4%. So there's obviously a difference in the pace at which people are able to increase their wealth. So my question to you is actually fairly straightforward. Is the government going to bring in a tax to tax these super rich people so that you have more money to spend on the poor?
See, let me first congratulate you. You have taken a very important discussion today, and I'm happy that in this election season somebody is taking this kind of discussion forward. Having said so, it's not a straight black and white solution. You tax somebody, you try to take out money from the rich so that he comes down. Another way is to rather bring the poor up. So let me put 3-4 points before I speak the solution and what is the government which has done in the last 4 years, what would be done in future, irrespective of the color of the government. So number one, let me quote one example and an authentic report. I don't know Oxfam whether it is an authentic, what is their methodology. I don't know who authorized them and whether they have given year-to-year comparison. Because if you don't have a historical data, you don't have anecdotes, then the report is questionable. But let me give you something which is very authentic report. It is 2006 H.K. Khan report. Which was generated after the UN asked us to generate how many people have access to bank. And we found out in 2006 that it was only 36% of the country who had access to bank. And so, that was one parameter where the government was worried. All the governments, irrespective of my government or the previous government, they were worried, how do we give access to bank? And we saw that in last 4 years, Jan Dhan gave access to bank. And now more than 92% of the people have access to bank. That is one achievement which I can quote, because H.K. Khan committee report is an authentic report. Number two, let me also tell you, one of the reasons of poverty is education, access to poverty. One of your panelists rightly said, funds available for RTE is less. But at the same time, you see the 10% reservation now will give access to education to the people who could not afford the education, irrespective of their religion, caste, whatever they come from, if they are from an economical backward caste. Third reason of poverty is there is something called a sudden shock poverty. What is sudden shock poverty? Somebody who is above the poverty line, who has been leading normal life, but there is a medical emergency in the house and the entire wealth of the house erodes and he falls into the poverty line. And then he parallelly being this thing. I think one of the good steps being taken by the government is Ayushman Bharat, where we have protected that kind of shocks which have come up. Now, these have been coming up in the last 4 years and we have seen many positive changes. Another reason of the poverty of the country and the deprival of the money is one, transparency, where the money has been spent by the government, whether it is central government or state government or local self-government, but does not reach the beneficiary. I think use of technology, especially the IT and the Aadhaar, made sure it reaches to the right person. There may be some teething problem which can be challenged. Now, last point, one more point. Then there is one more reason to poverty in a country like ours, especially India, which has seen democracy and a very weird kind of democracy where, the rich become richer, not because, he is intelligent or he is capable, the poor becomes poor, not because it is his fate. This is because the politicians choose to do the thing. And I hated to quote that. I should not have done this because there are all academicians on your show right now. But yet I would like to quote what Times of India once printed, that is on December 2, 2013, and they showed the richer person, more than richer than British Queen Elizabeth, and it was Sonia Gandhiji's photograph which came in Times of India. Now that shows that politicians get ill-fetched money, and that leakage many times leads to reasons of poverty of many people.
So corruption.
What I think what has happened the last 4 years, and
See, actually, Vinit Goenka, we've not invited the opposition to this conversation because I wanted it to be a conversation that actually solves problems and not points fingers at each other. But let me just go over the points you made. And you very interestingly said that the 10% reservation that was brought in by the government of India and passed by both houses of parliament was done in order to bridge the gap of inequality of income. Now, I'm very grateful to you because this is the first time since this 10% reservation was even brought in that anyone from government has told us what problem you were attempting to solve with the 10% reservation. So this will be interesting. Now it is in the Madras High Court, but I'm sure other courts will examine it and we'll know that the problem you are attempting to solve with the 10% reservation is the problem of income inequality. That's very good. So now we have something to work with. Now we can talk about whether or not, when we talk about this bottom 50%.
I can answer it if you allow me to answer.
No, I haven't finished my question.
Let me, before you go to the next
I would like to finish the question before you answer it, Mr. Vinit Goenka. My question is this. When you define, according to the government of India, poor as those who make less than 8 lakh rupees and have a home that is less than 1,000 square feet, then effectively, you are describing what is lower middle class in many cities and what is upper middle class in some other cities. So, as 95% of this country has now been categorized as economically weaker and poor, is this how we are going to solve the wealth gap? Is this how? I want to give our audience an example. Mukesh Ambani, for example, viewers, has a home that is worth 7,000 crore rupees. 7,000 crore rupees. Vineet Goenka said very clearly that the government of India is not considering adding a 0.5% tax to people who have this kind of money because you don't think it's a good idea. Mr. Goenka, you wanted to respond. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, one, your sarcasm and your quoting does not help, One, let me tell you, when I said 10% reservation, and you said it is only first time the government said it, you never invited me on your show for that particular thing. And you should also have a patience. One of the reasons poverty is there because of education, and that's the basic problem which should have been tackled 70 years back. If somebody who's intelligent, sharp, does not get a good admission because he can't afford that, I think probably this 10% will give a chance to that. Now, talking about 95% people falling under that particular category, then out of that 95% people, 50% already have reservation because of social status. Now, there are only 45% of the people. At least 10% should get that opportunity. That is the call. We can't put everybody in that basket, but yes, at least some people. So I think that is the first step been taken. A. B. Once you have an education, you will not only have income, but you will also have better way of living. You may live little hygienic, and that will lead to a better life, better healthy citizens. So that thing I think is a complete thing. A. B. You talked about Ambanis will not be taxed. I never said they will not be taxed. I said it is not the right way. Telling people that just take out money from the rich and so that the poor can become bigger. That would be the case, then communist countries would have been a very good place to live in. We will have to put in places where people start getting generating money. We will have to stop the avenues of leakages, and I think the current dispensation did right thing when it said we will plug all the leakage points, and the leakage points have been plugged. I think technology can be used for that. Aadhaar was an excellent tool. There are other IT tools which can be used in this particular thing. And as the days come, technology will help us to plug these kind of leakages. Once the leakages are plugged, then the rightful only will get the money. Now, if the rightful is rich or poor, that can be the second debate.
Okay, I just want to point out, you did say, of course, that if a bright person doesn't get admission because they can't afford it, they will not be able to live a good life, and that is a problem we're solving with reservation. I just want to point out that bright person can be given admission if we had more schools and colleges, and if government schools and colleges were on par. Now, I want to point out in the report, it says barely 12% of India's schools comply with the minimum norms laid down under the right for free let me finish. Right for free education and compulsory education. It goes on to say that in most schools, teachers are not qualified and they're not teaching. So if actually public schools had proper teachers and proper investment, and if healthcare had proper doctors and proper investment, we wouldn't need reservation. But Manisha Priyam joins us right now, political analyst and economist. Ms. Priyam, many thanks for joining us. Your reaction to the Oxfam report and Mr. Vineet Goenka's answers. Go ahead, please.
So on the Oxfam report, I would say a very timely report, brings up a very important issue, and look at the fact that it says that urban inequality has been increasing. Now this is a statement that's just trying to tell you about income inequality, but who are these urban poor? These are distressed people from rural areas being pushed into the underbelly of the city where citizenship rights are not theirs. Most of them are illegal denizens and are left at the mercy because they don't own property. So they are left at the mercy of people who are land sharks and give them tenuous rights to live. Now they have a right to live without the right to defecation. They don't have access to toilets, they don't have access to water, they don't have access to identity. I am shocked at the fact that the previous speaker, esteemed speaker, has such a garbled understanding that technology can help. Then please tell us how technology can help people living in Sangam Vihar for getting access to drainage of refuge, urban refuge. How does Aadhaar help? Now the second point is that the garbled understanding, if this income inequality is increasing, it's really a measure of increased distress in rural areas, pushing out the extremely poor. So it's also telling us that the universal basic income that you are thinking of in the nth hour, and that was a cover of Narega, basically in the Hindi heartland states, the BJP governments themselves had relied on the proper working of Narega to give a certain floor income to the rural poor. And this type of push of the rural poor becoming rightless urban denizens, that's something that's a horrible reality. Second, I would like to point out that the garbled understanding that this, if we do now 10% reservation, etc., can he tell me that even if those 10% were to get educated, do educated get employed? Does employment Does education turn into income automatically? No. So the broken chains have to be recognized. Garbled economics that does not recognize that poverty, urban underbelly of our cities is something to be recognized. If we don't recognize, please remember, Gandhi had a purpose when he decided to wear the poverty of this country on his body. And we should not be shamed today that the first statement of this country should not be the wealth of this country in terms of who lives in how many, but it should be in terms of the Gandhianism that just give up what you have if that's the only way in which we can resolve this. Third and lastly, I would want to say that having Jan Dhan accounts, it's like, if you don't have bread, go and eat cake. Have the account. Who's going to transfer money there? Are you going to have a trusteeship movement where all the people who are making big donations to your party or any other party for that matter, will you do direct transfers now? Since only all of you have so much data on Panna Pramukh, this Pramukh, all of you have everybody's Aadhaar card, all data is hacked and leaked. So kindly go to your party coffers and rather than spending it on political advertisement, for God's sake, just transfer it to the urban poor and don't regret. In times of flood, in times of distress, every democracy takes helicopters and just drops food packets to the poor so that at least the poor have something to eat and survive. And therefore, I would request that if these are the figures, shocking figures of inequality, of income inequality, one of the best ways and in which your party itself believes is of cash transfer, please go push the buttons of your party coffers and transfer it directly to the poorest and print it all out in the public domain saying we have exhausted all the public money we ever have and we've acted in the biggest public interest, and then come back and tell us that 10% reservation is going to give us education, education is going to give us employment, employment is going to give us money, money is going to make life very good for get educated, can't get a, for the urban underclass that I work in, maximum education is in the shadow market schools. Teach English by the morning, and the maximum jobs they are able to get are as cleaners in schools, multitasking staff on contractual employment, or the girls are able to work only cleaning the glasses of the big shopping malls that we have. Is this the face of growing India that you want to portray? And I would conclude by saying that one previous speaker spoke about Latin America, Brazil, etc. Let me, sir, tell you with authority that Latin America in the past decade or so has accepted that there were gross inequalities and they've gone through many social protection measures and mitigated measures of inequality. Those countries seem to be worth living even though they were late Democrats coming into the scene of democracy. So we have many lessons to learn. We shouldn't look down upon the efforts these countries have made in mitigating inequality and poverty in these countries.
Well, I just want to take a question back to Renu Bagol, who's from Oxfam. Renuji, here's the question for you. And this is something I've received on Twitter all day. And Nilesh Sinha has written to us as well just now saying, economic gap is not an India-specific problem. It's a common problem in all developing nations. It's not, it's not something that we should be so concerned about. Now, from your report, the thing that I personally found very jarring is that in other parts of the world, we compare the wealth of the top 1% of the population with the wealth of the bottom. Now, 1% of India's population is 1.2 crore people. Here, we're not talking about 1.2 crore people, we're talking about 9 people. 9 individual human beings who can control and have more wealth than the bottom half of our country. Why is this number more jarring than the numbers that Oxfam has pulled out for other developing nations right now?
So before I answer that question, Pai, I want to also respond to Vineet Goenka ji. Oxfam's report derives its data from very, very authentic sources. It is an authentic report. So I would object that if you call it, it's not an authentic report. We use Credit Suisse, we use Forbes billionaire list, we use the National Family Health Survey data. These are all very, very authentic sources of data. So please don't call it a not authentic report. The other thing I want to also respond to is this business about transparency in India.
It is not authentic. I have a reason for it.
No, let her finish, please. Let her finish.
There are these data sources. Yeah. The other is about transparency, and I want to quote the Transparency International data. The Corruption Perception Index to 2017 singled out India as one of the worst offenders in Asia Pacific region. So please, and we slid to 81 among a group of 180 countries. So let's also face these kind of rankings. These are global, very, very authentic databases and on which these kind of analysis is done. Now back to your question, Pai. See, we are not against the wealthy. What we are saying is wealth creation is good, but you need to have fair taxation. You need to ensure that there is enough, that there is a lot of avoidance. We have heard of Paradise Papers, we have heard of Panama Papers, we have heard of the fact that a lot of the very rich actually don't pay their fair share of tax, and that's what this report is pushing for. And another speaker had said about indirect taxes, huge dependence on 68% of our tax revenue is through indirect taxes, which hits the poor the worst, because this is, you are taxing your dal, your atta, your sanitary napkins. In fact, GST, when it was introduced, there was a huge protest, and then the GST on sanitary napkins was removed. So one must look at things in perspective. 68% of our tax revenue is generated from indirect taxes. That hits women and poor very, very hard. So it's about really taxing the wealthy to redistribute resources. It's not about a socialist system. It's about fair share, proportionately. What a middle class person who's in the tax net pays proportionately is far more than what a rich is paying. The rich pay more tax because they are more.
What would your definition? So let's assume the government, for hypothetically speaking, were to cull out a super rich category and as per your recommendations, bring in a cess of 0.5%. What would be your definition of that super rich?
So the super rich are, well, you recently saw the $1 billion wedding in our country. Yes. Those are the super rich. So, they are the people who can afford a lifestyle which is way
is that
beyond
someone who has wealth of more than $1 billion?
Sorry?
Would that be someone who has wealth of more than $1 billion?
Yes, these are the billionaires. So we have 119 billionaires in our country, but we are not anti-billionaires. What we are saying is the government policies, the public policies have to be such that they pay their fair share of tax. The money, that revenue that gets generated is used to providing public services, especially health and education, so that there's an opportunity for the poor and the marginalized, for people in geographies that are remote, to actually think of a better life, a better future. All these dream, and I completely agree with the previous speaker that, creating this whole
Okay, let's open this up. All right, fair enough. Let's open this up for debate. Now I'm opening this up for debate. Everybody's had their opening statements. And the question I placed before the panel, crystallized, is simply this. Should India be levying a 0.5% cess on the income tax for the billionaires? People whose worth is more, and $1 billion would be 7,000 crore rupees. Everyone will get a chance. 1 second. Professor Arun Kumar has had his hand up for a while. Professor Kumar, do you think we should be taxing the uber rich?
Yes, what we have to realize is that in the present phase of globalization, capital is moving very fast. The amount of capital that is moving is many times more than the GDP of the world. And therefore, there is a race to the bottom. Every country is reducing taxes. You look at Europe, the tax rates used to be much higher, and they've been brought down because capital is moving. So what we need to do is that we need to use wealth taxation, for instance, which has disappeared completely. We need to use estate duty, which would be also very useful. The third point is that our taxation is progressive up to a certain level, and then it tapers off. Then it becomes a proportionate tax. So I think what we need to do is we need to increase the progressivity of taxation above 1 crore of rupees. And therefore I define super rich in the Indian context as anybody who has more than 100 times the income. So that would mean 1 crore rupee of income. So we need to get a lot more people who are evading taxes today into the tax net by taxing their wealth and by putting estate duty. Then what you will have is automatically many more people will come into the tax net. and especially the super rich will come into the tax net. That way we can reduce the indirect taxes which are affecting the common person. So I think we have to have an overall strategy of public finance as to how to decrease the inequality by using our taxation policies.
Mr. Gopalan, R. Gopalan, former Finance Secretary, do you agree?
Well, let me put it this way. You see, you should increase the tax resources, which is abysmally low. Now, agriculture has not been taxed. Agricultural income beyond a particular range, why is it not taxed? Second, why black money in terms of real estate and those other things are still lying around? Why are we not able to get that on board and take some income out of it? Three, why not we ensure that we sell all the public sector units which are there? Government should not be in trade because it's no good for them to do so. So dispose them off and take the money and involve them in infrastructure, education, health and those kind of things. Why not we put the money there? Four, there is a case for a wealth tax, there is a case for inheritance tax. Probably if you ensure that many of these people do a lot of philanthropic work with their money, probably some amount of concession can be given in wealth tax and inheritance tax, but that should be kept in mind so that, I mean, some money flows out of this thing, but it should not be an disincentive for them to grow their enterprises and grow the economy. So that we should be very careful about. I mean, there are any number of such measures which are required to be taken. It can be done, but most of all, what is important is the political will to do it, to achieve it. There will be a lot of resistance. There will be a lot of difficulties for getting funding for elections. Now, the political parties, if they can overcome all this and then try to have a will to ensure that egalitarian society can be created in this country, it can really be done. It's a question
Mr.
of
Gopalan,
willpower.
I'm going to ask you uncomfortably to expand on a point you made. You said politicians are reluctant to tax the rich because it will make it difficult for them to fund elections. So are you saying a really rich, wealthy person will say, I will not give you money for your campaign if your government taxes my wealth?
You see, the funding of elections is an issue which more people in the panel are in a much better position to comment. Now, the funding of elections is becoming extremely distorted in this country today. Now, you also do not have a system by which you are not able to get so many other people into the tax net. You are not able to get the entire income they have into the tax net. Get all those things. For doing that, obviously, you will have to, the political parties may not get money for electioneering. Now, that's a choice. That's a choice this country has to make.
Well, Vineet Goenka, that is a difficult choice to make in election year. But do you think this government will want to make it? Are you politically inclined to do so?
No, I'm not talking of election year. I'm talking this as a policy, a medium-term policy. It's not an election
as a correction policy.
Kind of a policy. It's a medium-term policy. It has got to be.
Vineet Goenka, please.
Yeah, Faye, I hope I get the same courtesy from you on uninterrupted questions. So let me first, react on Manisha ji. Manisha ji was more political than any politician. I don't know which party does she represent. I hope she reveals what party she reveals. Number two, why I call this report a bogus report? Ms. Bokal, let me tell you, there is no anecdotes, there is no methodology, there is no quantum survey which has been done. This is the first copy available in the public life. This has never come up. And you cannot come out with first copy and say, then again, this is what we have been doing honestly. Let me punch hole in your theory. You have talked about 69 billionaires. Please let us know the names of the 69 this thing. And if you are saying you have covered all the billionaires, then is it Times of India is lying? Because when Times of India says Sonia Gandhi has $2 billion, so either they are wrong or you are wrong. You decide between you both. I don't want to comment whether Times is wrong or you are wrong, but one of you have messed up. So this report does not stand the ground. A. B. Let me tell you. My government came in 2014. We understood this problem. We took authentic reports. Authentic reports are the report initiated by my government. And 2006, it was country's government, whether it was Manmohan Singh's government. So we took H.K. Khan report. A. B. What we have done? access to bank, access to education. Number 3, let me quote you one something very, very basic thing. 2013, there were total 1 crore 77 90 lakh 93,701 vehicles on the road. I was in the task force of the Ministry of Road. So let me tell you one more number. In 2018, 2 crore 49 lakh 72,788 vehicles. Madam, do you want to say that the vehicles come on the road because there was poverty which was grown? A. B, let me tell you, per capita income of this country, 2013 it was 74,920 rupees. In 2018 it was 1 lakh 13,000 rupees. The cost of dal was 154 rupees in 2013 and today it is 42 rupees. The cost of petrol today is lesser than 2013 rupees. Madam, that are some parameters which are been missed in this report. Your report does not show the name of the people who are billionaire. Your report quotes very, very colored picture of the things. One more thing, let me tell you. Let me give you 2 examples. Rajasthan, the loan waiver has been given to people who are not farmers. These cases have come up. There are FIRs been filed. Whereas if you see in Maharashtra, farmers who wanted to take loan on inappropriate way were denied because Aadhaar was linked. So these cases have been there. And I have also seen earlier cases. Let me tell you, this more case, Gemalto, it came up a report and all the news channels. I'm sitting here with Fayji also quoted them. And Gemalto was quoted. Gemalto is like this, Gemalto is like that. And what happened is finally Gemalto gave a very big apology, full page apology in various channels because they were faulting up. I can also quote one more report coming from BBC. BBC turned down one of the reports saying that we will alter the report because it is not proper. So let me tell you, we should not take these kind of reports which are not proper, which are not been done scientifically, which has fault all the methodologies. We should not quote them. Yes, there is a problem of poverty and rich, inequality is there, rich getting rich. Madam, let me complete. You do not interrupt other, let me complete. Rich getting rich and this thing. Who are these rich? Are these rich who have become rich after 2014? And let me tell you, who are attending the marriages of these rich? People like, though there was a marriage in Ambani family. Chidambaram attends it, Mamata Banerjee attends it, C.K. Siv Kumar attends it, Praful Patel attends it, Deve Gowda attends it, C.B. Naidu attends it, and former President Pranab attends it. Now tell me, madam, is it BJP
first of all, Mr. Vinit Goenka, nobody said anything about the BJP. You are the one who's taking this personally. But first, I have to stop you because I've given you more time right now than I've given to any other panelist.
Be little balanced. I can understand your compulsion. I can understand your compulsion. When Manisha ji talk about sewerage person, we are the people who took count about this, and so we gave Ayushman Bharat so that they don't have to come to this thing. That's why we gave Krishi Vigyan Kendra. How many Krishi Vigyan Kendras have been opened in the last 4 years? Please tell Manisha ji should tell the people. How many medical colleges have been opened? Please tell the people how many medical colleges have been opened. Please tell what is the girl ratio. What was the female foeticide ratio before 2013, 2018. Now what happens in this urban nexus?
All right, Vinit Goenka, one second. Stop ranting. I just want to point out, Vinit Goenka has very rightly pointed out a article from the Times of India that was dated back in December 2nd, 2013. The article was headlined, Sonia Gandhi is richer than the British Queen Elizabeth. This was a Huffington Post article. It said that her wealth, that Sonia Gandhi's net worth was $2 billion in wealth. And he's right. Now, he wants to know why the name of Sonia Gandhi has not come up, because most politicians don't declare their wealth. And even if they have, we're talking about the top 9 people. Now, the top 9 people is led by Mr. Mukesh Ambani, whose wealth is $48 billion. And the number 10th person is Adani, whose wealth is $11 billion. And we're just talking about those people, and that list is available. The Forbes list is available for anybody to see. Second point, you said this is a bogus report. I want to point out to our audience one more time. One second, Mr. Goenka, no. I want to point out to our audience one more time that Oxfam's report on the discrepancy of wealth is released for all countries across the world, especially for those countries that have a very glaring gap, and it's released to the World Economic Forum before it happens in Davos every year. Now, for this year's report, it actually has no less than 20 pages of citations, specifically as to where the data has come from in different parts of the world, and a team of 20 people who have worked around the year to collate this information. Manisha Priyam, and I want to come back to you with this because I believe that I should give you an opportunity to answer. Vinit Goenka said that you represent a political party and that's why you make the statements you do. But I want to come back to the point I was asking. Wealth tax, inheritance tax, uber rich tax. Is it time for India to look a little more closely at its billionaires? Manisha Priya.
So, I don't like to waste my time on nonsense allegations of this kind.
Yes.
But I really think that there was an important point that I was making.
Yes.
That if you invest in education, So I would, through you, the anchor, want to go back to whoever
Which party
spoke
do you
before
represent,
me.
Manisha ji? You'll have
and
to tell the
say
party which is
that
funding
we
on
must
your...
read all the literature.
Yes, go ahead, Miss Priyam, go ahead.
No, Faye, sorry. This is not how we go. So this
No,
gentleman...
one second. I just, to my
so this
piece,
gentleman has
production
to be
control,
told
I'd like to hear Miss
that there's
Manisha
something
Priyam.
called the rates of return analysis.
Go ahead, Miss Priyam.
So he's got to study something called the rates of return analysis, which has been developed by Mincer, Becker and others. And the reigning god of this is somebody called Patrinos, who studied at the London School of Economics, where I studied for my doctoral degree. And this was not indoctrination in political party. There we were taught that certain investments in education lead to certain kind of outcomes. Now, Indian data on employment seems to be somewhat of an outlier to most of these theories, because the more, for example, women are investing in education, the poorer the rate of returns. The maximum jobs are found by the illiterates, and therefore that data, when it is put together with the data that is put here, and through your good offices, Feji, I would want to point out that the most important headline of this report is that urban inequality has been the major driver of rising inequality in India.
Yes.
And therefore, I am not representing a political party when, based on data for monthly per capita consumption expenditure, I am arguing the fact that we need to address urban inequality urgently. And if through your good offices I may point out, the gentleman may read the report. This report is impartial in saying that this has been growing since 1991.
Yes.
Therefore, this report is absolutely non-partisan, and I am non-partisan as I say it. I live my life. I refused an employment as I finished my doctoral degree anywhere outside the boundary of this country, because I believed that if the questions that I worked for my doctoral degree arose from the life and poverty of this country, this is where I belong. Tell me, which political party is this? We give up a lot of things and we stand here. If being with the poor, it is asymmetry, all right. My work arises,
Yes.
and he may see on academia.edu that a lot of the work that I've done, I have
Ms.
left the quantitative methodology and I've been doing a lot of urban ethnography, and all of this is literally sana hua in the lives of the poor. He may read Arjun Appadurai, who's told us that the voice of the poor, the space where they live in, needs to be seen alongside Gini inequality. Now, each of these definitely smacks of some political partisanship, and that political partisanship is of the poor, especially the urban poor, living in conditions that are inhuman. And I am happy to take this charge today. If this is the partisanship, then I like to live with this label on my head.
Yes.
And kindly, through your good offices, if more bibliographies are to be sent, I won't waste airtime, but I can send these through your good offices to the gentleman. These readings will be good, and I missed him as one of my professors at the London School of Economics. With his grand knowledge, may he find a tenure professorship there. I would be happy to attend his classes if these are the bogus theories.
I'm going to have to leave it there, Ms. Priyam.
Holding us ransom.
Yes. To wrap this up, this is where we stand right now. There are far too many people who are hungry. And the report, in fact, I feel sad about the fact that we weren't able to delve into what happens to women. Of the wealth that we're talking about 20% is actually held by women. A lot of the unpaid labor in farms, in homes, with children, gathering water, looking after sick is done by women. And these are women who could be earning a living and whose work and time and energy could be pulling them out of poverty, but they're forced to work for free because these services are not accessed. And that's specific to India. The women who have to go fetch water from kilometers away from their homes, that is time that could have been used to make money for their families. At the end of the day, born in this country, which is a socialist country, we have the responsibility to look after our poor. 1 in 3 children in our country under the age of 5 is horribly malnourished. And children who are not fed well from ages 0 to 5 will never grow proper bodies and proper brains, and they will not be able to compete with your children irrespective of the kind of reservation you give them. It says in this report that poor children are thrice as likely to die before their first birthdays than the children in your home right now. What I'm simply saying is this: as a country, as politicians, as journalists, as bankers, as PR people, as CEOs or CFOs, whatever your job may be, it is our responsibility to actively think of how we are going to bridge that gap. And we're going to help the poor out of the extreme poverty with education, with healthcare, with water, with food, and with access. Thanks for watching.